there, and welcome to our next TechCast here. We have Tracy Heilman here with us, Dr. Heilman, I should say, with us today. And she's here to talk to us about the MAP testing, and most specifically the reports that have to do with the MAP test. I'm going to kind of turn it over to Dr. Heilman.
Okay, thank you, Lance. For the first time this fall, we're asking teachers to share the individual student progress reports with parents at conference time. The other person that's really critical to share this report with is the student. So we're going to walk you through this report, the contents of this report, the supporting documents that you can find that Lance has already put on our website, that you can find there to download and share with parents or reference yourself. And then we're going to do a little bit of role play, and Lance has agreed to act as a parent, and I'll be acting as a teacher, sharing this report with and its contents, explaining it to parents. Alright, so the first thing we're going to show is the report itself. This is called the Individual Student Progress Report, and we've just grabbed a student at random off of our reports website at NWEA, and we will get you the instructions for how to get this for your entire class. And there's a very easy way to print this report for every student in your class with essentially 2 or 3 clicks of your mouse. What you have on this report is how the student has done from the first time they ever took the MAP test. And it's all subjects on one page. Well, in this case 2, because we also assess this student who is in high school with the science MAP test. So you have math, reading, language usage, and then down here some explanatory notes. And in this case, this student also has science results. So we have general science and then the concepts and processes in science. The next part of this report is the graph format of it, which looks like this. And it's the same information as we just saw on the text format, but this shows this nice multicolor graph, and I'll go through that also in just a minute. So, first of all, if we look up here, we have math in the upper left corner. What it'll show is at the bottom, this is the first time the student took the MAP test. It was spring of '07. So you see S, '07, then fall, then winter, and so forth. All the way up to fall of 2012, which is always going to show up at the top of each of these lists. This student is currently in grade 9. This is the student's score range. So her score was a 241 with a range around it, or a confidence interval, as you can see, but the score is in bold. So this means if the student took the test repeatedly, we're pretty confident her score would always fall within this range, but this is exactly where she scored this fall. District average. This shows what our district average was for our 9th graders in math this fall. The norm group average is what's typical performance across the entire nation and all the partner districts for NWEA in the fall in 9th grade. So district average was 223, norm group average was 234. Next you'll see student growth and typical growth. Student growth and typical growth are only reported from fall to spring. So if you look at last spring's results, this student's growth was 3 RIT score points from fall of 2011 to spring of 2012. Typical grade is 4 points. So the student's percentile range is listed here, and that's again a confidence interval. If she took the test repeatedly, we're quite confident her score would fall somewhere in between the 59th and the 72nd percentile. But for this particular test event, her percentile rank was 66. The thing about percentile ranks is this. 50 is right in the middle, or average, but there's a range around that middle that is kind of an average range, and it goes a little below the average of 50 to a little above it. If we see a percentile rank of 66, that indicates that her performance is above average. So if you're wondering, what does this 241 mean? How is she doing? She's doing quite well. She's performing above average in math. Parents may ask, well, typical growth is 4, but she only grew 3 points. You can say, you know what, her score was above average in both events. She's doing fine. Yes, maybe she lost a little over the summer or forgot a few things, but we're quite confident that she's going to catch up quite nicely. Then you move on to reading. All of the information in reading remains the same, you just are explaining it for reading. The thing that's different here is down here at the bottom you'll also see a Lexile range. Lexile ranges are always reported in 150 point increments. So her range is down here, 1187 to 1317. What does that mean? Well, for one thing, if you look up here, her reading is quite strong. Her score was at an 85th percentile. She had a 237 in reading. Her growth was 11 from fall of 12 to spring of 12, where typical is 2 points. She's doing very well. And if you look down here in all the areas of reading, she ranged from average to high in terms of her reading skills. We don't really teach reading, we teach the skills involved with reading, and hers are all quite strong. So that's a reference for Lexile, but if you want to know exactly what it means, you can go to lexile.com and you can actually create or generate lists of reading materials that are aligned with this reading level. If parents ask, how do I use this? I say, well, this indicates a range of reading materials and indicates what kind of support she would need to be successful with those. So, if you want to do independent reading at home, I would tell parents you choose materials that are at 1187 or below. 1317, that indicates, well, she might have some success with that, but she might need a lot of support to be successful with material at that level. And again, if you look at lexile.com, and we can put some resources for that on our website as well, or look at their website, you can see what kind of materials are at that level. And then you get to language usage down here in the lower left, and again, the pieces of information remain the same, but they're in the area of language usage. Good? Okay. Now, in this particular case, this student also took the science test. She took it in winter of 12 and spring of 12. We only tested some students with science last year, mostly at the middle school, so you won't see this on most reports, but if you do, science is broken into two areas. There's general science and concepts and processes. And again, you can look at the student score, RIT score, the district average, the norm group average, and then the student's percentile rank. And all of that, you would explain those in the exact same way that you explained it for math, reading, and language usage. There is a nice explanatory notes section on these reports down here in the lower right. Each one of those explains the pieces of information that are on that report. So you can also show that to parents for their reference later on, and maybe they'll say, I don't quite remember what this particular number meant. The information is there. It's pretty basic. They may have more questions, but that's a good starting point for them. And next, we have the graph format of the same information. This tends to be the one that is easiest to discuss with parents. What you'll see on this is you can print it in black and white, or you can print it in color as we have here. Here you see the test events from the first time the student tested over on the left to the most recent time they tested all the way over on the right. What you want to see is exactly what you see here. You want to see an upward trend. This student, like many, has some ups and downs in her pattern of performance. I'm not really worried about that. We do see that from time to time. Why does that happen? Well, a lot of things can happen. Maybe you have a little bit of summer loss in terms of math skills or reading skills. The student may be having a bad day on the day that they took the test, and maybe they just weren't focusing well, maybe they didn't feel well. But when you see an upward trend from the left to the right, and the student is performing well in comparison to their peers, that's not something really to worry about. So here's the pattern for this student. Every student's scores will show up in the dark blue. The norm group average, which is national average, shows up in light blue. And then our district average shows up in orange. And the other thing you'll see on this report is it'll give you a growth projection. from this fall to next spring, where in terms of other students her age and her grade level, starting at the same point in the fall, where did they typically end up in the spring? So this will typically be an upward trend. So that's the minimum amount of growth that we would expect from this student from this fall to next spring. Other than that, the content remains the same. Parents may ask, what do you plan to do with this information? And you can say, let's look at reading, for example. This student's scores were high in most of the goal areas, but only average in main idea and details. My response to a parent would be, I'm going to work with this student on the particular goal area of main idea and supporting detail. Other than that, she's doing very, very well. This is a supporting document that will help you bring some context to the MAP data. This one is called Comparative Data to Inform Instructional Decisions. This one also has, and I've printed it in black and white, it is available in color, and that's how you'll see it when you click the link on our website. And you can share this with parents. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. This is the area of math, and it shows you this is average right in the middle, higher achievement going up, lower achievement going down, and it's got the grade levels from kindergarten to 11th grade. The other thing you'll see at the bottom of this math section is what score is typically associated in MAP with readiness for the next level of higher level math. So you see a 230 for Intro to Algebra, 235 for Algebra, and 245 for Geometry. I should have my reading glasses on. And then here you'll see reading, language usage, the general science, and the science concepts and processes. This is just another piece, again, to give you some context for the information. If you need to know how is this student performing compared to his or her peers, you can look at this document and it'll help you make sense out of that. The other one you can look at is the one that's called normative data, and that one will also be linked on our website. The next one that you can use in visiting with parents is the Parent Toolkit. This one will also be on the website. This one talks about everything there is to know for a parent about the MAP assessments, and it's a PDF file, and that's what it looks like. You can go through that at your own leisure, I suppose. It's pretty in-depth. You can certainly print these for parents, or you could direct them to them, or just have a few copies available if the parent requests more information or wants more detail about the MAP test. They could look at this document. This one is something I think will be really helpful for teachers at conference time. This one is a strategies packet for parents and students, and this will also be on our website. It's kind of a checklist. In the goal areas of reading and math and language usage, particularly reading and math, you've got some different skills that you could suggest to parents to build in that area. For example, here's reading. Reading and writing skills, actually. But if you said, okay, this student's scores on the MAP assessment indicate that vocabulary development is an area of need, here are some specific strategies that are appropriate for parents to do with their kids that you could just check a couple of them that you think would really be beneficial for that child. And we have 8 pages here, and again, it's broken down almost by goal area, so you can get very specific about what you're recommending to parents. And this is something that you could discuss as a kind of a partnership piece. At school, we're going to be working on these skills, and at home you can reinforce them by doing this or that. And this is something also that you could talk with students about and say, I talked with your mom and dad, and they're going to be working with you on developing your vocabulary. They're going to ask you to do things like talk about the people you see and the types of jobs they have, or sing songs you both know, things like that. So you can get pretty specific with what you're recommending. I would just check off a couple of things, and that's how I would use this.
Okay, so tell me about, is my child on grade level? Because that's what I'm concerned about, is if they're where everybody else is in their class.
Sure, you want to know that your child as a let's see, a ninth grader this year is going to be competitive with other students her age once she graduates high school.
Correct.
Yes, she is. There are a couple ways we know that. One, we can take this RIT score, 241 in math, for example, and we can go to some of these documents that we have. This one is called comparative data to inform instructional decisions, but we could also look at the document called normative data. And for ninth grade in math, the average score is a 233. So your child's score was a 241, so yes, she is above average. There's another piece of information on here that tells us how she's doing in math. 66th percentile. 50th percentile is average. And if you look at what our state calls proficiency on our state tests, that would be 40th percentile or above. So in both cases, yes, she's on grade level. And if you look down here in all the areas of math, she was above average. She was high average in every one of the goal areas within math. Number sense, geometry and measurement, algebraic concepts, and data analysis and probability. So she's quite consistent, and she's above average in math. And you could go through the same kind of process for reading or language usage or science.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that there was a drop in the score from when that she took the test in the spring till now this fall.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned about that.
Well, there are a couple of reasons why that can happen. Actually, more than a couple. For one thing, over the summer, most of the time we encourage kids to be kids over the summer. They may not be studying, at least not as much as they do during the school year. So keep in mind, from last spring to this fall, she wasn't getting formal instruction, and maybe she was, as a ninth grader, she may have had a part-time job. She may have been doing some babysitting. She was doing other things. So that's not unusual. Also, there are times when we all have a bad day, and maybe it's more difficult to concentrate. Maybe it was uncomfortable in the room. It was too hot at the beginning of the school year. The air conditioning wasn't working. So a lot of things can happen. But there again, what I would focus on is if you look at from beginning point in spring of '07 to currently in fall of 2012, she is doing quite well. She is outperforming both the national average and the district average here. And if you look at the information we just reviewed over on the text format of this, she's still above average. And keep in mind also, her percentile rank has not changed. She was at a 66th percentile in the spring. She's still at a 66th percentile in the fall. It's just that her RIT score has changed a little bit. And her projection from this fall to next spring is certainly still in a positive direction. So if we look at this trend line, everybody has their ups and downs. But we can see that she's definitely on her way to doing well.
How I'm concerned about my child comparing to other students in the state or in the nation. Does this tell me where my child is at as far as compared to students, other students that she might have to compete with someday, I guess?
Yes, and especially getting into college and things like that. There are 2 points of comparison on the MAP assessments. We get a district average, which is shown on our graph in the orange line. And we get the national average, which is shown in the blue line. Also, the percentile rank is based on a national average. It's not a district average. So nationally, she is certainly competitive. We do not get a state comparison with MAP, which I think is okay. I think it's more important for us to know that our kids are competitive with other kids nationally than just with other kids in the state of Nebraska. I would suspect that Nebraska averages would be somewhere in the same range as national or district averages. But this is the one that I'm concerned about. If you look at every area for this student, math, reading, language, she is outperforming the national average consistently. So yes, she's certainly competitive.
If my student takes the MAP test, why do we still have to do the statewide test?
The state accountability, which is the NESA test, Nebraska State Assessment, and we have that in reading, math, science, and writing, is our high stakes test. That's important feedback for us as a district. We need to know how are we doing in terms of teaching the standards that are required by the state of Nebraska. The shortcoming, as I see it with the NISA assessment, is it's sort of like comparing a physical that you would get from your doctor to an autopsy. The NISA tells us how we did. It is after the fact, it's at the end of the year typically, and it just tells us how we did. What MAP tells us is what to do. It gives us a roadmap for instruction. One way you can think about this RIT score that we get from the MAP test is think of it as meaning ready for instruction today. Because NWEA has aligned their RIT scale, it's an equal interval scale, just like a ruler or a yardstick. They've aligned it with our state standards in all of these areas. So we can choose a state standard and we know what RIT score corresponds with that standard by their alignment study. That tells us that's what this student is ready to learn. So if we go into some information that they provide us called Descartes, and we can look up this score range, and then we can break it down by goal area even further, it tells the teacher that's where this child is ready for instruction right now. The other thing that's unique about MAP is it's an individual experience for every student taking it. It's adaptive. So the first item on the test starts out at their grade level. If they get that one incorrect, they get one that's easier. If they get it correct, they get one that's more difficult. And so when it's found their instructional level, they're getting half of the items correct and half incorrect. That's the exact zone that we want for teaching and learning, because they have some context for information that they're getting, but they have a lot to learn from the teacher in a learning environment. That's what the MAP test provides us. It's very detailed and it gives us information on what to do instructionally right now.
Excellent. I noticed in the reading area, a couple of the scores were just a little bit lower or down. Is there anything that I can do as a parent, or can I work with her on certain things, or
Sure.
what kind of suggestions do you have?
Okay. So yes, her reading score was very strong. She's above average. 85th percentile is a very strong showing. So she does well. But what you'll notice down here is you'll see that some of her skills within the area of reading were high and high average, and then she had one area that was average, and that is main idea and details. So on questions that were asked within the MAP assessment about main idea and detail, she had a little bit more difficulty with those. Now I don't want you to worry about that because her score was average compared to other peers nationally. But it was a little bit lower. So how can we push her skills forward in that very important area within reading? There are lots of things you can do. First thing I would direct you to is the Lexile range here. So for independent reading at home, I would suggest you go to Lexile.com. You can enter in this Lexile score, and there's a place for that. It's very straightforward and easy to use. You can enter in this score, and then it'll ask you to choose topics of interest for your child. Maybe she's interested in mystery. Maybe she's interested in nature and science. You can pick topic areas. And it'll generate a reading list for you that are appropriate for her Lexile level, her reading skill level. And I would focus on this end because we want independent reading. When we get up here, she's going to need lots of support for understanding those materials well. So those are things that maybe at school with a lot of support from the teacher she'll be successful at home. Go with this level or up to 150 points below that. So that's one thing. Next thing you can do is if we look at this strategies packet for parents and students for improving reading, writing, and math skills, there are a number of things we can do here too. She's a little bit old for reading to her, but maybe you can read together. Maybe share a book. You read the same book at the same time and have some discussions about the topic of the book. One of the things here, check your child's assignment notebook daily. Well, we have a one-to-one initiative at our high school, so she doesn't have an assignment notebook. But you can log into PowerSchool and look at what her assignments are and discuss those things with her. So those are just some study habits and those kinds of things. We can go to the library to get books at her level. We have labeled our books in our schools with the Lexile levels, so she can go to the libraries at school and pick things out. And then as far as that main idea in detail, you can talk with her. And that's another suggestion that you'll see down here. It's under vocabulary development, actually, but open-ended topics. Ask her questions about what she's reading. What did she understand from it? What did she get out of it? If she could give the story a title, what would it be? That will give you a good idea if she's understanding what she's reading. So main idea and supporting detail are comprehension skills. So that's where you want to ask lots of why questions. What did you think about this? Why did you think that? Always kind of dig deeper and get those meaning questions from her. So we have lots of potential strategies here. We could go down to reading comprehension and pick out specific strategies for improvement. Then it gets into writing. But those are some of the things that I would suggest.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.